And whatever their sensibility, all the great choreographers of the period acknowledged Balanchine. Public esteem for abstract dance grew worldwide. Even the most traditional of companies incorporated abstraction into their repertoires. In England, in 1965, Frederick Ashton choreographed monotones for the Royal Ballet. And from her experience with Cunningham, she kept the free use of space.
New York has had quite an influence on the work I do. First of all, because New York is a place where the ideas about art are mostly circulating, and it's where there are a lot of questions asked. I began dancing purely by chance because one of the women from New York City Ballet moved to my hometown. She opened a dance studio, and all the mothers of the town decided that their daughters should go there to get grace. I danced for 5 years for the Merce Cunningham Dance Company, and for the first 2 years I worked very hard to learn this new way of moving, but then, punk! I was ready to do virtuoso dancing again. I began making movement that was extreme, huge, precarious, off balance, angular, fast, full of momentum. It was completely articulate and clear on the one hand, while being flung and wild on the other at the same time.
William Forsythe now works in Germany. However, he is an American. He arouses such passion that some speak of him as a contemporary Balanchine.
I went to a high school in Long Island outside of New York, and I played rock and roll music every day on the radio, and I danced with the refrigerator, in the kitchen. And I watched television, and I watched Fred Astaire on TV all the time.
Forsythe was born on Long Island. His father was an advertising executive. The world of his childhood was one of images, commercials, and television. He received a classical training at the school of the Joffrey Ballet, where most of the teachers were former Balanchine dancers.
From Balanchine, I would like to have his legibility.
Forsythe has never ceased to work with classical material. In Germany, he has become interested in the Laban system. Its cornerstone is the kinesphere, the circular space around the dancer delineated by the extended limbs of the body. This way, Laban multiplied the possibilities for movement, but the dancer remained centered. Forsythe has burst through the Laban sphere by imagining potential points of departure from anywhere in the body, the left ear or the right elbow.
What you perceive to be three-dimensional, you can also translate within yourself. I don't know where he's going to go. So you just got to go like that. Okay. One, go, boom, see. Are working on materializing forms that manifest themselves within the dancers' minds according to things which they know. Okay.
What interests him is the moment of the articulation of movement, the destabilization, the decentering. His dance explodes form in order to reveal movements normally obscured. Is close to a trend in architecture known as deconstructivism, which also exposes the details normally concealed. Forsythe himself readily quotes the architect Liebeskind.
The violent archaeological traces of significance in Berlin have been taken up here in this project and disclosed in a way which architecture normally hides. For example, I have chosen to intersect the structure of the building, which is a linear structure, with the linear structure of the old north-south Speer axis, which, as you know, went to the very center of the power of the Reich, and to expose this axis by actually opening it as a public space, and then having the actual architectural intervention crossing that axis and blocking the development of the north-south axis. the main strategy in this problem is not to look at the Berlin of the block structure, but to really look across the wall.
With constructivism, a utopian architecture which imagined a new city for a new mankind, deconstructivism is a critique of architecture, questioning its own history in order to dismantle the steps taken towards a utopia whose flaws now seem self-evident.
I don't look with nostalgia at modernism as being the prototype of what is happening today. Quite on the contrary, I see it as a very informative and key dimension. And certainly my own work and those of many others who practice today does not have the utopian connotations, does not have the notion of the perfect world, rather accepts what architecture tradition has accepted, the imperfection, the fact that architecture is practiced in a world which is already lost.
Forsyth gathers material for his dances from everywhere and anywhere. The journey his teacher Balanchine made, he needed to make in reverse. From the United States of America to the old world of Europe to the Frankfurt Ballet.
And what you think you see, you think you got to sign. When you got to see, you saw, you thought you think, but what you think you saw, you thought you think you see, you think you thought you think you see, and what you think you see, you think you got to sign. When you got to see, you saw, you thought you think, but what you think you saw, you thought you think you see, you think you thought you. Every time I step inside, I remember what I always say. And every time I step outside, I forget what I never said. Every time I step inside, I remember what I always hear. And every time I step outside, I forget what I never thought. Every time I step inside, I remember what I always do. And every time I step outside, I forget what I never think. Every time I step inside, I remember what I always say. And every time I step outside, I forget what I never thought.
I feel like I'm sort of floating around the world. I don't feel like I have roots. That's strange, yeah.
I'm a star
From the beginning of this century on, classical ballet found a rival in North European expressionist dance. It was Rudolf von Laban who laid the foundations for this new form. He was born in 1879 in Bratislava, at the heart of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Habsburg Empire was a mosaic of diverse cultures, races, and traditions. Laban was the son of a military officer and able to travel across the empire. From very early on, he was fascinated by the diversity of dances and the variety of the body's movements and expressions he saw. His father wanted him to enter the army, but Laban preferred the bohemian life to military maneuvers and painting to the art of war. He studied fine art in Munich and in Paris. In 1907, he returned to Vienna. The empire was on the verge of an extraordinary apocalypse. Nietzsche had proclaimed, "God is dead." This led to wholesale reevaluation of the established order. In Vienna, Wittgenstein outlined his first theories, encouraged by Krauss. They both brought the limits of language into question. In Vienna, Freud denounced the powers of reason to explore the depths of the psyche. In Vienna, the writers Schnitzler, Hugo von Hofmannsthal, and Zweig, and the painters Kokoschka, Klimt, and Schiele revealed the fragility of the individual and his disintegration. Again in Vienna, the composer Schoenberg revolutionized traditional harmony by liberating music from the formal structures of tonality. The pace of industrialization accelerated. There was a violent reaction against the threat from society and the machine. This was manifested in a return to nature, to a free and healthy body. In this atmosphere, the Americans, Isadora Duncan and Ruth St. Denis, met with great success. They wanted to free the body from any constraint. Their best-known disciple was Greta Wiesenthal. In this environment, Laban would lay the foundations for a new dance. First of all, he located its essential components: space, time, and weight. Dance had evolved in a flat space, limited by the audience it was forced to face. Laban cut through this and gave back to space its depth. He conceived of movement through space in a volume whose form would be the icosahedron, that is to say, a volume of multiple directions. Space became a mobile partner to the dancer, moving at the same time. He then addressed the pace and time of movement, quick or slow, brief or sustained. No longer limited by music, the meter of a poem or silence alone sufficed. Movement was freed from time. Finally, he addressed weight. While the classical dancer tried to escape the downward pull of gravity through balance and lift, Laban made use of weight. It was he who determined the dynamics of movement and the continual swing between balance and imbalance. He realized that for every muscular contraction, there was a relaxation. Laban liberated movement from all formal constraints. He emancipated it from music, drama, and from any conventional notion of steps. His search through movement for a total harmony of soul and spirit had parallels with the ideas of Der Blaue Reiter, the Blue Rider, a group of painters who had settled in Munich in 1913 around Wassily Kandinsky and Franz Marc. Kandinsky said, "Every work of art proceeds from an inner necessity," and also said, "Art has to render visible the invisible." After the summer of 1913, Laban gave classes and lectures in Switzerland at the edge of Lake Maggiore in Monteverita. It was a center for the intelligentsia. There, Rainer Maria Rilke, James Joyce, and Hugo Boll were to be found alongside the Russian anarchists. All basked in a society in harmony with nature and in the climate of reform. There, Laban found the perfect conditions to experiment with his ideas. In the middle of one beautiful hot summer, Mary Wiegman arrived. She had come from another utopian community, Hellerau, where her teacher was Jacques Dalcroze. His Eurythmics were the rage throughout Europe, providing Nijinsky with the inspiration for the Rite of Spring. But the Dalcroze method, which subordinated movement to music, no longer held an interest for Mary Wiegman, and the solos she choreographed without any music had left Dalcroze unmoved. At Hellerau, she had met some painters from Dresden who used the dancers as their models. Influenced by Fauvism, by black art, and by Edward Munch, they dreamed of uniting art and life in an explosion of color. There were 4 of them. Their group was called Die Brücke, the bridge, and they marked a new departure for expressionism into the plastic arts. Emil Nolde, who was closely associated with the group, was a friend of Wiegman. On his advice, she went to meet Laban. Like her, Laban found his inspiration from movement itself and not from music. Wiegman became his pupil and then his assistant. Laban needed a dancer to challenge him. This Mary Wiegman did, and they began a period of intense experiment. Wiegman presented her first solos in which she used the concept of Labanian space. She said, Laban created for dance what is represented by harmony in music. He used the laws governing space as a point of departure, a basis for the creation of dances. Laban and Wiegman were at Monte Verita until the end of the summer. When war broke out, they moved their school to Zurich, where it shared quarters with the Dadaists, whose refusal to join the war sharpened their wit and their scorn. Dada was concerned with creative writing, which also interested Laban and Wiegman. Wiegman created a strange echo of the Dadaists' own research. For her, it was a question of inventing a discourse where the communicative strength lay not in a grammar, but rather in a rhythmic pulse. The artists met at the Café des Banques, the precursor to the Cabaret Voltaire, where Mary Wiegman often performed. Meanwhile, the rest of Europe was being torn apart. The war left behind it a world in ruins, millions of young men dead, and an entire generation destroyed. The painters from the group Die Brücke and others, Max Beckmann and Otto Dix among them, remained scarred forever and gave German expressionism a new direction, more harsh and aggressive and full of despair, notably in Dix's trilogy filled with mutilated soldiers exposing the